On Production is brought to you by Wrapbook, the production industry's only on-demand payroll platform. With Wrapbook, you can pay your crew with a click and track all your costs in real time, all in one place. To find out more about how Wrapbook is transforming the way productions pay their crews, visit wrapbook.com. Welcome to a special episode of On Production, celebrating the innovative intersections of today, film and investment. I'm joined by Marc Iserlis, the head of film at Republic, which is a platform that's revolutionizing, I think, how we think about film financing and financing of all different types of upstarts. At Republic, they're not just crowdfunding, they're crowd investing, which allows everyone to have a stake in the entertainment that they love. Marc's extensive background in film production and his current role make him a really interesting figure in this shift. Marc, it's fantastic to have you here with me on production and dive into the future of film financing with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Cameron. And congratulations to you and the whole Wrapbook team on the essential platform and service you're providing to an industry that is really going through change right now.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, would you mind starting by telling me about your journey to becoming the head of film at Republic? What drew you to this approach to film financing?
So I started out kind of in traditional and still we do traditional film financing, equity, working with equity financiers, high net worth individuals, sometimes institutions or funds, putting them into independent film, 5 to 20 million. So I worked with financiers on films like Hotel Mumbai with Dev Patel, last year's Dali Land with Ben Kingsley, a couple of genre films that have premiered at the festivals. So got to know sort of the independent film financing structure, which of course is, I don't have to probably tell this audience, different from the studio financing structure and the TV development and sales structure. Um, and then I also have been on the creative development side. My producing partner, he ran CAA China for many years, and together we developed a IP universe around kind of like true crime, cross-cultural Asian narcos. And that got me understanding the sales process to the streamers, the studios, on the documentary side and on the scripted development side. So we have a couple of those projects going. And then COVID hit, and I sort of swapped LA for Miami for a little bit just to see what was going on down here. And it was kind of this giant melting pot of VC tax refugees. There was the whole crypto moment here, for better and for worse. But there was a lot of innovation and a lot of talk about doing things differently, especially on decentralized financing and things like that. And I thought, how can we apply this to film and entertainment? I kind of went in with the logic, pretty much in the independent film world, from my experience, the two primary ways to finance content is either going to high net worth individuals, asking individual angels to invest equity into films, on the equity side at least, not talking about debt necessarily, or obviously pre-selling your film to a big studio and kind of getting bought out from your IP studio or streamer. There was people here with decentralized financing, with the NFT train, kind of talking about how can you use NFTs to give people ownership of something. A lot of that action ended up being perceived as illegal securities. You were offering a chance for unaccredited U.S. investors to buy some kind of token or something to invest and get a dividend. If that's not done in the right way, that's illegal in the States. That's why crowdfunding platforms are all donations driven. And then I met the guys from Republic 2 years ago. And Ken is a securities genius. He was born out of AngelList. And Republic is one of those rare companies out there that has all of those securities licenses and regulations to allow for unaccredited investors in the US to invest into private market assets. So Republic, AngelList had this, they were the leaders in democratizing venture investing on a platform. So you can kind of click and get into venture deals or startups. Republic is doing that, but also allowing for people who are not millionaires or on those yachts to get in on tech, startup, real estate, gaming. And when I saw they could do this, there were 3 million users on the platform who have raised over $2.6 billion into all these industries. I said, we have to do this for film. And so I set about building out Republic's film vertical that basically, the mission is to create this new channel and avenue to allow everyday fans, investors, US, around the world, The real innovation here is that we can do it for unaccredited US investors to invest in the films or content or projects or studios that they love at any point in the value chain, development, production, or distribution, or even equity into a production house, and crucially, share in that upside, that financial upside.
That's really awesome, Mark. So, at the recent Toronto International Film Festival, Republic launched its film financing vertical that you're just describing. Can you share more about what this entails and the kind of impact you foresee in the film industry, given that you've seen this done the classic ways, and now here's this new path for unaccredited investors to have a piece of equity in a slate of films or a film?
Absolutely. So at Toronto Film Festival, we kind of unveiled what is its own kind of vertical for a film and entertainment. We do music and sports as well. So most things on Republic are venture startups. You know, you go in at a certain valuation level, you own equity. When it exits, you will hopefully profit. And films, of course, are revenue share deals where you sort of sit in the waterfall and you share in the revenues along the way. We'd had great traction in the entertainment space already. Last year, the studio Skybound, which produced The Walking Dead, raised 18 million in equity from fans, from people, investors and fans of The Walking Dead of Invincible to own a piece of the studio. Watford, the football team in the UK, also groundbreaking moment, allowed fans to own finally a piece of their team, own equity in their team. They raised 5.5 million. What we chose to launch with a TIFF was the Pressman Film slate. Pressman Films, of course, the producers behind American Psycho, Wall Street, The Crow, Badlands, Bad Lieutenant, Thank You for Smoking, those Judge Dredd Street Fighter movies, like an incredible array of independent films. And I think then every launch we does has to have a narrative, and the one of this one is let's make movies like these again. And yes, it's development into a slate of films, but you get to be there on the ground floor as a fan of those films, and hopefully make these kind of daring, bold films again that are maybe different from some of the Marvel fatigue or streamer algorithm fatigue that we're hearing. And so, republic.com/Pressman was launched. It was a 75-day raise period to launch 1.5 million from retail investors. Could be fans, could be accredited, could be institutions. Retail investors to develop a slate of 6 new Pressman films, some of them remake IPs, some of them new IPs. And the terms are there on the page, the sizzle videos we're kind of doing God's work explaining development financing to retail audience. It's not simple, but Sam Pressman, CEO, does a great job. So the Pressman film was wanting to raise 1.5 million to develop 6 films. By the first week of Toronto Film Festival, we hit the 500K mark minimum. By a month after launch, we hit the $1.5 million target, and we closed over the weekend at $1.85 million. Obviously, the more money you raise, the more films Pressman can develop. And the next raises that we have coming up are we have similar development slates from people like Robert Rodriguez. We have a top horror director, and the narrative there is let's make the next Blumhouse type of studio together. We have a top Indian Bollywood studio, Eros Film, and the narrative there is let's allow fans to invest into the sequels of their favorite Bollywood franchise films. We've got Snoop Dogg's son, Cordell Broadus, doing an animated series pilot about Inglewood, but allowing the Inglewood community to invest into the production rather than pre-sell it to Netflix and have them own the upside. So again, every kind of launch has its narrative, and I'm really hoping that from the success of the Pressman raise, from the interesting projects that we have coming out next, from development to production financing to even distribution and debt financing, that this sort of opens up the doors for new ways of financing films. Thus, the logic is the more you can allow your fan community to invest through this portal Republic now, legally invest, then you build up an audience, without having to depend on somebody else to greenlight. You have your own built-in equity, and it helps you on the distribution front as well. When you go to premiere your film or content, and you tell the distributor, hey, cool it on your P&A funds as well. We've got an audience of 10,000 investors here who are going to promote their film to all their friends and family. So again, I'm hoping that it also leads for films to become more profitable as there's a built-in audience and a buzz just inherently from doing things differently.
That was great. I actually wanted to sort of dial in on this point. So, can you explain like how Republic's model in more detail not only funds the project but also then builds a dedicated audience that contributes to a project's success? I mean, you've mentioned that Republic is a equity financing tool for unaccredited or accredited investors. Instead of crowdfunding, it's like crowd equity funding. Uh, but then, you know, entertainment's interesting because we can also watch these things and be fans of them. How is it really working out? What's that dichotomy like? I think you were talking about it a little bit, but yeah, how does it build the dedicated audience that contributes to the project's success?
So very key point that you're mentioning. Now we're getting a little bit from like what Republic is and can do to what I have to also really be careful with in terms of the right projects that are right for this platform and marketing together. So first of all, Republic is a regulated broker dealer funding portal, and we cannot, Republic is designed to be a neutral marketplace, a neutral platform. As a result, we cannot favorably market one securities offering over another. So really, the onus is on the issuer, the project, the producer, the filmmaker, the talent to market to their community. Republic has a standard. We have a large community of 3 million. When a project launches, we'll do a launch email. We will have a standardized maybe 3 to 4 posts per project raise life cycle, a podcast included. But usually, Republic investors, we could say, can count from between 20 to 40% of a raise volume, sometimes higher, of course. If it's SpaceX has been on Republic, it's much higher. But this is a new asset class. And we want to make sure for the success of both what goes on our platform and for the issuer raising money that it might be the best deal in the world, but you have to have a megaphone to a community to get them interested in the deal. So in Cordell Broadus, the Inglewood community and Snoop Dogg's kind of community, hip hop, the horror community is extremely active. Pressman and Robert Rodriguez are kind of these cult filmmakers. The Indian Bollywood diaspora is just massive around the world, and especially getting talent. The last aspect of this is as a filmmaker on this, who is going to use this service, does it fit the paradigm and the narrative of your key talent with their key audience? It's not, again, we're trying to change the paradigm here from this is not crowdfunding, please give me money. This is crowdfunding. I'm inviting you to come and invest with me and make a film together and share in the upside. And these are, again, kind of drawing on earlier, these aren't weird cryptos or anything like that. These are legal securities that can pay dividends.
Very helpful. So you've mentioned this a moment ago, but there's been some successful raises already on the athleticism side. The Watford Football Club, which raised I think was $5.5 million. But then you've also done Skybound. How much did Skybound raise?
Skybound raised 17.9 million.
Wow.
Yeah, as equity shares into the company. And then this year they actually released another raise to develop a video game based on the Invincible TV show IP, and they raised their $700,000 basically in a few weeks from a lot of repeat investors.
I mean, you've seen both sort of quote unquote traditional funding for films and entertainment. Now you're leading the way here at Republic. Like, what does this tell you about the appetite for investing in entertainment and sports right now? Like, why is this to you just so clearly the future?
With sports, I love the anecdote that like sports fans, or the way I see it at least, they kind of have the rawest deal. They spend all their money on sports fandom. They get in trouble with their wives for getting too drunk at the games. They get into fights. And what do they have to show for it? They don't own any part of their fan kind of investment stake. So with these platforms like Republic, you can finally allow fans to come in. What better fan engagement is there than to own a piece of your favorite franchise, your favorite team or IP or equity? I mean, even in the Indian Bollywood example, they're a studio, but a lot of this is just fan engagement to allow fans to get in on owning a piece of their favorite movies. I just think it can change the game from a necessary new capital raising perspective, from a fan engagement and marketing perspective. It can be an additional PR story driving the buzz of your film, coming out throughout the process, doing things differently, engaging fans and the audience before it comes out, which will hopefully boost theatrical attendance, theatrical marketing and upside. That's for the film front. On the sports front, similarly, fan engagement, less of a revenue share model. For example, in the Watford Football Club in the UK, just a step below the Premier League. They allowed fans to buy in and own equity, really passionate fans. Elton John himself has been a lifelong fan of the club. But you also have certain perks that come with your equity investment. You get to go to special beer stands in the stadium. You get to have special seats and access to team events and things like that. So that's really meaningful.
That's awesome. So, the name of this podcast is On Production. Our audience are producers. Every producer out there is always interested to learn, new things about how you can finance a slate of films or a project. Can you dig in for us the sort of mechanics of what this looks like for a filmmaker looking to leverage Republic for funding? Like, what advice would you offer them to make their project stand out? What is the workflow for sort of engaging with Republic, if other filmmakers actually want to bring their type of projects to the platform for fundraising?
As I mentioned, kind of together, it's about finding, I love to hear, of course, different ideas. What is the right film or project at this moment that can engage, a passionate and sizable community that will effectively, like, raise equity investment on the platform? Together, we sort of figure out the narrative, as I was mentioning earlier, for that project. And of course, figure out the investment terms that retail investors are going to get as well. Treat Republic. Republic does sit as just one item on your cap table. We do all the financial distributions to all those hundreds or thousands of investors that come in. So I would just give us the same terms you would give to one high net worth individual, and we allow the retail investor base to basically pro rata play at those terms as well. So I encourage industry or favorable standards to your retail fan investors. So together we decide on the narrative, we decide on what those terms are, and then we onboard basically your project onto the platform, and then we have a project management team, and what that entails is doing the due diligence part of it, which is essentially filing the paperwork to the SEC to allow for unaccredited retail fans to invest. That involves a kind of a very simple financial audit, working with your lawyer, or we have lawyers that can help guide through the securities kind of forms that need to be filed. And on the other side, we of course do the marketing, building the page. What are, explaining really in human terms, what are fans getting into? What is the project? A sizzle reel explaining again simply how film financing works and what investors are getting into. And then we determine sort of a launch period. How long is this live for? And we really develop again how to get that promotional, how to broadcast this deal to the widest audience. Is it influencers? Is it owned social media challenge from a talent? Is it kind of a social cause driven documentary where you can tap, different influential groups or organizations to talk about why this needs to be made? We kind of come up with all that together and yeah, and do groundbreaking stuff.
That's super awesome, Mark. So I've had a lot of awesome guests on this show, both professors of film finance, people that like deal with the studios representing their clientele related to IP rights. I it's been wonderful to chat with some of those people. I'm really curious though, and in speaking with them, they have dug in, around things with waterfall or like how the equity gets distributed after the fact. Do you have any like sort of way to articulate how that would work with Republic? You mentioned that like Republic acts as like the entity on the cap table. What does that flow look like operationally if a filmmaker goes ahead and is able to raise from the crowd this way for their films?
Absolutely. Really great points. So we also advise on what the best way to structure these deals are like. Is it into the parent company? Is it obviously opening a new SPV for a film or a development vehicle? And then Republic sits as a broker dealer. They take a cash commission, of course, on the raise amount raised, and then the rest of the funds kind of flow into whatever vehicle the film sits in or the project sits in. So we figure out how to structure that. We guide you through the securities requirements of it being a U.S. company if you're tapping the U.S. unaccredited audience, things like that. And then in terms of again the marketing and the explanation of how film works to retail audiences, different structures are different. Development financing, of course, is you can get your principal and premium back upon principal photography, and then you get a slice of a producer's fee, a slice of a rights fee, a slice of the net profits. That's at least kind of the model we used for the Pressman film slate across multiple films. When it comes to production financing, I encourage, the industry standard principal and premium from the waterfall with a pro rata share of the net profits, that kind of thing. When it comes to distribution financing at P&A, it's often debt, maybe an equity kicker to really get, invigorate your audience who wants to be part of a film coming out that they want to see out in the world. What is that valuation for, equity for your for your production company or studio that you're building. Debt financing, I mean, it's interesting. Debt financing is there are credit facilities already existing to finance tax credits and things like and pre-sales. But Republic also offers a way to basically syndicate some of that investment to a retail audience or allow a retail audience to also participate in those debt deals, which again is just great kind of audience activation and creating this new class of or this new channel for credit. So it's all about again explaining what I just did as simply as possible to a retail audience. Film financing is notoriously complex, and I feel like a huge joint mission of Republic is to sort of break down those barriers and demystify a lot of what's holding the film industry back today, which are these kind of gate kept ways of doing things.
Super fascinating, Mark. That's awesome. So looking ahead, I'm curious, what are some of the exciting developments or projects that are happening at Republic and that aspiring, not even aspiring, but filmmakers and investors should be on the lookout for?
Thanks. And before we go into that, I will say obviously a key piece that for the film community here is we are not talking about fractionalizing IP, of course, right? We want to keep chain of title clean. Another thing we explain, of course, is that we are basically sharing the economic rights or the revenue rights with everybody. And so on those types of deals, the revenue share deals, we have a development slate deal in the works from Robert Rodriguez, and we have the Bollywood studio. We have an animation pilot, as I described. We have a horror director of many different horror franchises. And the play there is kind of let's build the next, horror studio Blumhouse together, do events together, things like that. We do have a debt deal, which allows for finally retail to buy into those, sort of IRRs of 16%, those guaranteed IRRs. I don't want to almost give away too many names because there'll hopefully be a whole press release and audience activation structure in the ways that I was describing earlier, teasers, getting influencers going on Reddit, like getting the buzz going. So yeah, I hope you will reach out and I encourage you to follow the space, which is on republic.com/film.
That's interesting. One thing, I mean, you just mentioned it, Mark, is IP, and IP is like a really important thing for many filmmakers as they are pursuing a career, especially as the industry has changed so much. Like, is there a world where IP ownership fractionally is available for retail investors via Republic? I mean, obviously, some filmmakers really want to weigh the trade-offs there, but if you're trying to bootstrap some sort of IP ecosystem, maybe there's a path here.
I agree. And this is where we kind of bleed back into that blue sky nebulous territory of like the blockchain and what people were trying to do with NFTs until it breached securities laws. And this is something we were talking about earlier, Cameron, how I feel there's so much innovation happening in the film space. There's Rapbook, which is innovating production, execution, and accounting tools. There's new forms of direct distribution, filling in the gaps of big theatrical releases and even like kind of streamer releases. Republic has this kind of moat around it because we have those securities licenses, so we're clearly innovating additional ways of capital raising and financing film, and of course perks that come with being an investor in a film. Obviously you've invested certain amounts, you get access, you get credits, you get behind the scenes and things like that. But when it comes to fractionalizing IP, I mean, why don't we fractionalize IP? It's obviously so that you can easily, quickly sell your film and chain of title so that your buyer doesn't have to deal with 100 contracts. But what blockchain technology and smart contract technology aims to do is basically automate all of that and put it on a clear and digital ledger. If you start to have the ability to do that efficiently, I think then you can allow. There's that example that the blockchain people love to use, which is you know, if only you could like take a stormtrooper from Star Wars and then create your own film about his backstory, but you're still kind of, you know, in the correct in tow with the larger IP and residuals or payments or licensing deals and things like that. As blockchain can start to automate that, there can be you can enable your fans to engage with your IP in super interesting ways. But I feel like those steps are cool perks and cool future additions that will come as we sort of figure out the technology behind all of this.
That's awesome. So what are the next best steps for our audience of filmmakers in terms of I think for our audience here on production, not so much the fan base. I mean, I know that many of our listeners are rabid fans of the cinematic arts, but they're also the doers, the makers, the builders of these types of projects. If they want to learn more about Republic and this form of crowd-based equity funding, what are the next best steps, Mark?
Thank you for not calling it crowdfunding there. I love it. And I also encourage, crowd investing over crowdfunding. And next best steps are please drop a note to republic.com/film or at any inquiry onto the republic.com portal. Or Cameron, feel free, of course, to link directly to me with anybody listening. I encourage people who want to kind of, you know, finance any stage of their project this way is to think about that narrative and that community access point. If it's a sports documentary and if there's an executive producer, a former athlete, for example, could they be incentivized to be like, hey, fan base of me or this sport, let's make this movie together and share in the upside. If it's a musician and a passionate fan base, let's make this documentary with and by the fans. Or if it's a community or social cause driven documentary, that kind of thing, or an IP that you want to involve the fans with on their sequel. And if there is that kind of play and that kind of large community, I think it could be a real hit. It could be and I would love to sort of brainstorm on different projects that may or may not have those access points. The other thing that I will say, just to add to the earlier point, again, I'm jumping around here, is when you asked about IP innovation or innovation in general, as I said, we are that portal for you to access retail investing into projects. The cool thing is what Republic is differentiating the space from a few of these other platforms is we have these shares in films or projects are underpinned on a blockchain so that you can trade your share in that so that an investor can trade their share on a secondary market. And that's something that's really cool as well that we can do.
And so that's happening explain that more. Like, that means so that there's this classic market of securitizing crowd equity funding, but that there's also a secondary market where the equity holder has theoretically some liquidity if they want it. That's really novel and interesting. Could you explain more? And we should wrap this up.
Bad. Yeah, I squeezed in that last. I don't usually include that point in sort of the core benefits right now about, you know, doing raising for projects in this way. But the vision of tokenization in general, just happening in, on institutional levels with banks and everything is that you're basically making secondary marketplaces more liquid, that you'll be able to that retail audiences will be able to trade their share in whether it's in assets or whether it's in funds and things like that onto secondary markets. So if you're an investor in a film, it's very hard to trade out your share, to somebody else if you want to exit early or send your kid to college or whatever it is. Well, Republic has an infrastructure in place where an investor in a film at a fractional level that we're talking about will be able to list their share on a secondary platform, which Republic also has, called INX, and our sort of on the Republic platform, and see create a marketplace for that for somebody else to basically take that share which comes with those revenue rights and perks off of your hands. And again, the goal there is just to create more liquidity in this marketplace, to create a robust sort of new investment pool of everyday investors. So yeah, that is a great bonus, but that does of course happen after the fact, after an investment is filled and going and people own those shares. So the first step is to let's make some movies together, and please let's share ideas.
That's awesome. Well, Mark, thank you for joining me on production and sharing a bit about your background, what Republic is, what Republic Film is in relation to crowd equity funding for films and film slates, and then lastly, also this this interesting bit about a secondary market as well once there is liquidity from an exit, whether that's a VC deal, a sports team, whatever it is. Very, very interesting. Really excited for our audience to sort of be able to learn more and see if something like this works for them, but fascinating nevertheless. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Cameron.
On Production is brought to you by Wrapbook. With automated time card calculations, real-time production accounting, and payroll you can run with just a click, Wrapbook makes it easier than ever to manage your entire production from one login. To learn more about how Wrapbook is transforming payroll and production accounting, check out our website at wrapup.com.